Don't make me
take my belt off.
Don't make me sing a solo. Hey, this is a networking event. We ain't here to socialize. Thank you. You're the first one ever to laugh at me. I'll say thank you. You're my favorite person already.
You're right.
Hey guys, so welcome to SBREIA May 2022. As we started last month, we're going to start out with a pledge and a prayer. And until y'all run me off, that's how we're going to open up. So here we go. And we got a flag in here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, let me bless it. Father, we're just so thankful for this time together, Lord, as the pledge announces, Lord, we are one nation under God, Father. That was the intent of the forefathers, and so with everything in us, Father, we just want to follow that example as well, both as a group and as individuals. We're just grateful for our salvation and all the goodness and grace that you bring, Father. I just pray that you'll bless this time together. May we fellowship. May everything we do and say individually in our business bring you glory and honor. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, thank you all. So, forgive my hat and my, I was going to say dress, but casualness. I got in late last night, about 1 this morning from Atlanta. Was there since Wednesday evening, speaking at a national event, and I had a lot of fun. Those are always, a real joy for us to go to these training events and participate both as a student and as a speaker. I got home about 1 a.m. last night and barely got up this morning, and as you can imagine, being gone away from your desk for 3.5, 4 days, it's been nonstop. But I'm glad to be here with y'all. Once we kind of go through this and our ladies get started, and I want to hear as much of their presentation as I can, I'm going to have to jet out just a little bit early. So anybody that wants to volunteer when we're done and close this out, feel free. I would appreciate that. So has everybody signed in so far? Everybody signed in? That way we can stay in touch with you a little bit. Thank you.
Sorry.
You're so awesome. Special guest. I know I've got a personal guest, a friend, Roger Pascal. He's from the East Texas area. Known him for over a decade. He's an author, speaker, lecturer, national mentor, and teacher across the country. He has a really unique business model revolving real estate, and we hope to get him on the schedule soon to come back and present to us what all he does and his opportunities for all of us. I sat through the presentation several weeks ago, and very intriguing. And so we're really, really glad to have you, Roger, and look forward to getting you on the agenda to come back. Our special guests are Miss Maggie and Miss Taylor. They're from Durrett Title and Law. They're both from McLeod, Texas. They went to the same high school and ended up, hanging out and working together. And so we're tickled to have y'all. The only experience I've had with Durrett, we've closed a couple of deals in Washita Parish. And I think maybe Miss Amy, did y'all have a lady named Amy? Yeah. She's with the brokerage now. Yeah, Harrisonville, yeah, because they just sold another property for us over there. They did something, you sang a little bit. And then I thought I was going to bring suit against another title company for some things they did wrong, and I spoke with Andy Durrett on the phone. Super good guy. He walked me through what to do, and he actually talked himself out of a job. He told me what to do, and I did it, and it worked out fine. So I was grateful. That meant a lot to me. So that has been my experience with y'all. It's been very, very positive, very, very good. So we're glad to have y'all. As y'all know, title companies, they basically have a dual role. Number one, they facilitate the closing, and they also provide title insurance for us, which is a very important component, for all of us. So we look forward to hearing the presentation, very much so. Any other first-time attendees here with us this evening? Everybody's pretty much been here before? Good deal. I also want to mention that Marcus has set us up a QR code back on the table here. You can scan it. Ooh, check that out. You're so creative. You got a brain and a light bulb. And so if you have suggestions, comments, any topic that you would like to see us put on the agenda that means something to you or would benefit the group, you can actually flash that QR code with your phone. I guess that's what you do, turn your camera on, and however QR codes work. I'm so technologically challenged. Yeah. At 57, I have no social media outlet. So anyway, y'all know what to do with that. I'm going to have a suggestion box next month, I promise. I've said that 2 months in a row.
So we have a suggestion basket tonight, and if you think of topics that you want us to cover, you can write it on the back of this and just drop it in there, and we'll do that for this evening.
Does anybody need pens? Pen? Okay, you don't want that.
Excuse me too, Roger, I want to add this. With that QR code, if you submit a suggestion or an idea and you think of something later, you don't have to rescan it. You can go to the link that generates in your email, click it, and you can update it and add information to it. And it'll send an email back to me to let me know that it's been updated.
Thank you, man. Thank you for doing all that work. We did not have a board meeting last week. I was out of town. I think the VP was out of town. And so everybody... Oh, y'all did? Well, good for y'all. I apologize.
It went on without you.
Went on without. Did y'all meet at Marcus's place? Anybody bring any food in? Nope. I was going to say, if y'all brought food in, I didn't get no leftovers now. We'll be upset.
And by the way, you're not president anymore. No, I'm kidding.
I said, this is my last stand, huh? My last stand. So, Miss Nancy, you got a report and buy-sell trade and all that fine work you do, please, ma'am?
Absolutely. So last month, we had the good folks from Property Standards, and goodness, they gave us a lot of information, and it was recorded for our website by Marcus. I'm just going to go over about 3 points that I thought were especially interesting, and that would be that tires are a serious issue. Who knew? I guess a lot of mom and pop tire shops illegally dump tires. And so that is one of their biggest challenges in property standards, is what to do with over 25,000 dumped tires. Who knew? Okay. One of the biggest problems, or another one of the biggest problems, is people who buy property at tax sale and then become slumlords and rent out those properties illegally. And that's no-no. Landlords can have cars towed. So that's one of the other things that I thought was really interesting.
Landlords can have cars towed?
They can have cars towed. I don't have notes from the board meeting, and Julie, I think, took some notes, so if there's anything pertinent, we'll get it to you. But I think, Marcus, you recorded the board meeting as well, right? So it'll be on the website as well. So the last thing, and I've explained this to a lot of folks here, with membership you get the opportunity to do buy, sell, or trade. I don't have anybody who filled one out tonight, so that's it.
Nobody has anything they want to buy, sell, or trade? Well, I'll just interject real quickly. Guys, our company, we're in full acquisition mode. We're trying to buy everything we can. So y'all know of any good deals on the market, whether you're a wholesaler or just know something in your neighborhood, please keep us in mind. Typically, we're interested in assets $100,000 and above, but we're expanding our horizon a little bit on the lower end and on the upper end. So please keep us in mind if y'all know of anything that's for sale or any deals that may fall through. We definitely want to try to buy and consume what we can. You got a treasurer's report, Mr. Chad Garland?
Don't have a lot of new information to report. Everything financially is about the same. I mean, we've had a couple of 3 new members tonight sign up. I'll send them an application to see. We've got roughly 40, give or taking, folks that have signed up and paid dues for this year. But other than that, that's about it. Miss Terry is working on trying to get us still affiliated with the National REIA, and that was a big part of us becoming an official 501c3, which we are now. So
Yeah. C3 or C6?
C6.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I'm happy to report that I think I've got everything all gathered and I'm ready to submit it, so.
Good deal, good deal. Well, the guy that I was with in Atlanta for 4 days and nights, literally in class from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. is Lou Brown. And Lou Brown actually was president of the Georgia REIA, and he's the one that established the national REIA and started that national REIA, so it was really good to hang out with him for a little while. So I'm dying to say this. Ms. Taylor, so you gotta back me up. If no one laughs, you gotta laugh for me. Okay, I'm going to say this for a long time. All right, so, I went to Atlanta, came in, got home about, flew in, got in about 1 a.m., and boy, are my arms tired. Y'all never heard that one, have you? No, that's a good one. Flew in last night, and boy, are my arms tired. Okay.
We'll be here all week.
And hey, there's no charge, we don't charge y'all for this. Okay. Update on the rental registry, any updates, Mr. Joe or Mr. Tommy? Are we still stagnant, sitting where it is?
Stagnant.
Good deal, good deal. Miss Janet was asking about Airbnbs. And that registration is still in place with the city for short-term rentals, is that correct? Has that been established, and is that a new ordinance, guys? Does anybody know if that ordinance is passed? No? Okay.
I don't think it has.
Okay, all right, good deal. I'll try to get you some additional information on that, Ms. Janet. City of Shreveport is trying to pass an ordinance, if you have an Airbnb, a short-term rental, anything less than a 30-day rental, you have to register that and have a registry number on all of your advertising. Otherwise, they're gonna clip you a fee and a fine. So just keep that in mind. To add value, I've been trying to do a little 5-minute bonus session just to add value to our members. What's our membership count up to right now?
It's about 40.
Okay, good deal, good deal. And so I will pledge to do a better job, as all of us can participate in, calling members that we don't see and invite them, hey guys, come back, because there's strength in numbers, and we learn from each other, both in our successes and our failures. But as an added value, what I've been trying to do for you guys is to bring y'all just a 5-minute bonus session, something to add value to the group, ahead of our speakers coming up. So 2 months ago when we started this, I did a 5 or 10 minute presentation on $10 houses. It's a new acquisition strategy based on when the property was originated, the loan, and who it originated with, and the financial collapse of 2008. If you find houses that fit some criteria, the government bailed out these companies that bought these CDOs, and so they've been paid back. And if you find a house that got that financing, you can actually get that debt wiped out. Pay $10 for the deed, get the debt wiped out, and you own a $250,000 house for $10 literally. And then last month we did, raising private capital. Today I want to talk to you about a really, really cool concept, and I call it the proper way to early pay your mortgage, okay? Yeah, I think you've seen this before. Matter of fact, we've had some really good conversations on this, even down to the details of the algorithms as the numbers flow through. So our example, guys, is going to be a $200,000 loan, 3.5%, 30-year amortization, okay? So this is what it looks like. So the payment is going to be $898.09 on a $200,000 loan, 3.5%, 30-year amortization. And what's funny about amortization table, it's made up of the Elwood tables. And so, you pay years and years and years before your principal is equals to or is more than your interest. These things are heavily loaded with interest on the front end. The curve when you pay the thing off is long and slopes slowly. Banks know that. Banks also know that as individuals, as families, that we are going to move or refinance every 7 years. And when we do that, the Elwood tables start all over, heavily laden with interest. And these banks make most of their interest on the front end of the loan. Matter of fact, on this particular loan, it's payment 123. So you're 10 years and 3 months into the mortgage before your payments start going more toward principal and less toward interest. Of course, we're down to the final 3 payments. But it's 10 years into that loan before more is going toward principal than interest. Banks know this. So, from time to time, some of us may have a little extra money we want to throw at our mortgage. And typically the thing is, we'll just send an extra check in or an extra payment in, and that's good. That's better than doing nothing. But when you do that, guys, so let's say we have an extra $650 this month or a month to put toward our mortgage. Typically what we're going to do, we're just going to send that extra $650 in with our payment or separate from our payment, or however you want to send it in. And what the mortgage company's going to do, they're just going to take it off the bottom. Okay, so now your last payment $359, instead of owing $895, you're going to owe $245. So they took your extra $650 off the bottom, okay? If you do it again next month, you got 359 wiped out, and 358 went from 1788 down to 1383, because now you paid 650 twice. So the moral is, when you send the money in, guys, they're gonna take it off the bottom, okay? That's just how they do it, and that's better than doing nothing. What I wanna suggest that we do, let's say that we have that same $650, and you've been in the house for a couple of months, or it doesn't matter how long you've been in your house, you can put this in play at any time, as long as you know where you are in your amortization schedule. So we take that same $650 a month, guys, and we write out, when we go to take month payment number 2, or wherever you have an amortization schedule, we're gonna send in, somebody add up for me, 316.59 and 317.52. What is that total, please? Anybody? Thanks, Ms. Magna. Making our guest speaker do all the work.
634 a month and change.
634 is change from a forensic CPA, so you know he's probably pretty accurate. So, 11 cents. There we go, thank you, Ted. So, what we're gonna do, guys, instead of sending $650 in, we're gonna send in $634.11. We're gonna have a separate check with a letter. Hey, I want this $634.11 to be applied toward principal payments number 3 and principal payments number 4. And so when you send that in, the $634, instead of the $650, they take it off the bottom. This is what's gonna happen to you. Those 2 interest payments associated with that payment of $581 and $580, so, you know, $1,161 or $62 and some change, we'll call it 11 cents. Those interest payments get wiped out. You will never pay interest on those 2 payments, okay? And what it does to your balance decreases from $199,052 down to $198, so just a little bit of principal reduction. The amount right there is how much the principal reduction is. Now, so you did that month 2. Okay, you did that month 2, you sent your extra $634 in. Next month, when you go to make your payment, you're actually making principal payment number 5 now, because you've skipped, you prepaid these, and that interest there, when you prepay these, that interest goes away. You'll never have to pay interest on those 2. Now you're making payment number 5, 318, I'm sorry, 898.09. So when we send in that extra $634, it almost has the same net effect at the bottom. Because here, it reduces here, and it reduces all the way down. So that extra $634, now we wiped out payment $359, and the next month we send in an extra $634, we're down to $1383, where before, you know, we had paid it down to, $1383, we paid it down to 4, and now we paid it down to $1521. So the net effect is the same. Instead of $1581, it's $1324, okay? So the net effect is the same on the bottom. But where the reward is, we'll never have to make those 2 interest payments again. And if you do it again next month, you're making payment number 5, you send in these 2 added up as an extra payment. It'll save these 2 pieces of interest you'll never have to pay again, and the next month you're making this payment. So you can literally take a 3.5% interest loan and turn it into a 1% interest loan by doing that and never having to make those interest payments again. But you have to send in to the penny exactly how much you want to send in with a letter. So you got to write a check and mail it in and say, I want these extra payments applied for principal payment, you know, 3 and 4. Does that make sense? I know I kind of rushed through a little bit, but yes, sir.
There's, Brad, this is a very good concept that most people don't know about. The other added benefit is that if you pay ahead like that, then all of a sudden finances get tight. For whatever reason, you don't get paid your rent money on your houses or blah, blah, blah. You're paid ahead. So you can gradually get 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12 months ahead. And then if you just want to quit paying for a while, you can, because you're paid ahead. They can't say a thing about it. But most people do not realize that. That's the other added benefit of that, is that it's like, it's literally money in the bank.
Yeah, big time. And you're saving, every time you make an advance payment, you're saving, at least on the top end of the schedule, at least $580 in interest that you'll never have to pay again. Bankers don't want us to know this, you know, because they're getting less interest, but we want to know that. That's why I wanted to share with you guys. Really, really cool thing. Yes, sir.
I can tell you, Roger showed me this 3 or 4 years ago. I could not find one thing on the internet about it. I thought it was not true. My banker, I asked him about it, he didn't know anything about it, and I literally showed it to my son and I coordinated it for him. we did the letter and all that, and he paid his house off like about 3 years.
That's
And
okay.
100% of whatever interest you pay is what you said.
Yeah, you'll never have to pay that again.
Like I said, it's a little known fact. I mean, maybe financial people like me knows about it, or how a lot of them knows about it, but very few people understand that concept. Very few people.
So whether it's your personal home or investment property or whatever, and guys, you can start this at any time. You need to know where you're on the amortization schedule, okay, to start this. So wherever you're on the amortization schedule, you just pick up right there and start making those extra. And if you have an extra, you know, $900, you can knock out 3 principal payments and save $1,500 or $1,600 in interest, okay? So keep that in mind. If y'all need me to help walk you through your individual schedule, let me know, man. I talk real estate full time. I have nothing but time at my office. I'd love to visit with you further about that. So that's a little 5-minute moment session. I hope it helps. I hope it adds value to you guys. So now we want to. Still eating, girl. You're good. Okay. So we're going to turn the floor over to Ms. Maggie and Ms. Taylor and let them come up and talk to us about the fine work that they do. And we're so glad to have y'all. Thank you for coming. Ms. Pat, thank you so much for inviting them over, and anxious to hear what you guys have to say. Yeah. Roger may need some IT help, but I bet when they plug and play, it's going to be good.
Roger, you want to hit the button on the projector, like you did a while ago?
There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Menu help? No, let's see here. Try that. Oh, computer. Yeah, Roger, you may have to come help us out, please, sir.
It went in our slideshow.
Marcus, will you-
I was hoping you'd get it, Roger.
I know, man, yeah. Is that mine?
I guess you just wiggle forward. You got the magic touch, that's it.
He does, he does.
A little short in the board. When you go back out, when you move it.
I moved it. It's one of those things where you can probably say like exact 35.6 degree angle.
So I'm Maggie, thank you, Roger. I'm Maggie Weaver, I'm with Dirt Law and Title in Bossier, and this is Taylor Parker. She's the managing attorney for both our Minden and Bossier City locations. BJ Garrett is the owner and senior attorney in all of our locations. We do have 5 offices across Louisiana. You know, I'm jumping ahead. We have 5 offices in all across Louisiana. And our main office is in Ruston, and then we have our 2 offices in Monroe, an office in Minden, and then our office in Bossier, which is where I primarily work out of. And Taylor primarily works out of our Minden location.
Yeah, just because that's what space allows at this moment, but that won't be the long, that's not the long-term goal.
And then in the Bossier City office is me, and then Amber is one of my closing coordinators, and then Christy, who works remotely, but is very hands-on on the files that she's on. So you'd never know that she wasn't in office.
I have people come in all the time and they're like, well, where's Christy at? And I'm like, she actually works down south in Lafayette, and they have no clue. She's on all of our security systems, has the firewall, our own phone system, so it's seamless and people have no idea. You know, COVID did have some perks with that, I will say.
We are a full-service law firm. We do offer all types of, that's on that side, so I barely know anything. I know we do successions, wills, and estate planning, oil and gas, yeah.
We do have a family law attorney, we have a plaintiff that does plaintiff's work, so personal injury, that type of deal. Does, I believe, evictions and things like that, and I know that that would be something that would come up. Hopefully, I wish that badness on y'all, but if that ever does arise, we do have attorneys in our office that can handle things like that. And then we do have an attorney that does estate planning. And one thing that would be really beneficial for y'all, if it's not something y'all have done, is we do business transactions. So if you don't have an LLC set up for your benefit to protect yourself from liability with your rental properties, that's something that you really definitely need to do to protect yourself and your personal assets, and that's something that our office can do outside of the title world that we do.
In all of our locations. I was just gonna touch on like what our closing costs are for a buyer in a cash sale position. So we have our abstracting fee, our title exam fees, our settlement fees, and then if applicable fees, and then our recording information. These would be our fees for a finance purchase with a lender involved. We always make sure that our fees are extremely competitive than market. So if you or your client has any questions, or you've been quoted like a lower rate from any other company, we're always happy to discuss matching fees as long as we're comparing apples to apples. And then our sellers don't have any closing costs if they don't have a mortgage. Okay, so what we're here for. So what do we do, Taylor?
So the biggest part of what we do is we are making sure that the title that you receive at the closing table, whenever you give the seller money, is good. So that way, whether or not you're planning to flip the property that you have or rent it out, you're not gonna have issues in the long run. So you're not gonna have outstanding interest out there. There's not any heirs that didn't give their interest at closing. And then the other huge thing is obviously mortgages and liens and judgments and things like that. And the other thing is y'all had somebody come and talk about property standards last week, and that's another thing that we're gonna see on the public record is if there's any issues with property standards, they're gonna file a letter stating that there's been a nuisance, and we're gonna make sure that there's not any money owed to the city in that instance.
Well, you'll know what a title search is.
Yes.
But a title search is an early step in the home buying process. It uncovers all of the issues associated with what that property has.
And we're gonna do at a minimum of a 30-year search of those records. So both the conveyance records that are gonna show any right-of-ways, any acts that are translative of title, and then of course the mortgage records that are gonna show any judgments and things like that that I talked about.
And so how do we do that? We, prior to you purchasing your property, Taylor specifically, not me, will get that abstract back from our abstractor, review all those documents, make sure everything looks good. Are there certain things you're looking for, Taylor?
Yes, so we are an attorney state when it comes to title. Not every state is gonna be like this, but in Louisiana, we do require that an actual attorney has to sign off on that title work and that title exam. So that's where really the important part of my job comes into play. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is we are very lucky with the volume that we do handle. We do outsource our abstracts. So we have an actual person that we give them the order. We'll start with the tax assessment of the property, and she will run all of the names all the way back to those 30 years to make sure that we'll catch any judgments that would have maybe shown up in the chain that may have been missed, which we'll talk about some horror stories later where that has happened. But I'm going to take those documents and I'm gonna start, my preference is to start all the way back at the start of their search. I'm gonna make sure that all the appropriate parties that needed to be at closing signed off. So if a spouse didn't sign at closing, I'm gonna be looking for those types of things because we are a community property state. Successions, I'm gonna make sure that the will that was probated was done correctly. I have learned over the years that it is very important to go back and read those wills to make sure that if you have like an executor of an estate, that they've been properly appointed in those instances. And then I'm also going to be checking for form. So in Louisiana, we have very specific form requirements when it comes to documents. Biggest one is going to be donations and things like that, and I'm going to be checking to make sure that they were done by off and exact, so meaning they were done with a notary and 2 witnesses. And then the other thing is that will come up with y'all sales if y'all have your company if you have your property in an entity like a limited liability company or a corporation. I'm going to make sure that that is properly done as well, that all the necessary members have signed off and agreed to allow the property to be sold and purchased. And then I'm also going to make sure that any judgments or mortgages that show up are the appropriate parties and that we pay any of those off. So I take all of those documents and I kind of put it all up in a summary for them to be able to put the title work together for your closing.
Sounds like a lot.
It is, depending upon the size. I will get everything from, we've held this property for, we've had 2 owners, and it'll be a quick little short examination to, you've got rural land that you're planning to subdivide, and it's 800 pages. So, I see it all.
So what title is it's just your ownership rights to the property. And the reason why what Taylor just said is so complex is because of all the records they have to search. We have to search public and private records, looking for all those liens, those tax issues, those unpaid child support judgments, any liens filed against you, because unfortunately, even your credit card judgments do attach to your property. That's something that a lot of people do not know.
Yes. And something to remember is if people have stopped paying their mortgage, they usually have already stopped paying other bills. So,
our title searches are good enough to protect your property rights because we do offer owner's title insurance. And that, it does protect your homeowner's property rights with the properties. A loan policy only protects the lender's interest in the property, and only an owner's title insurance will protect your specific rights to the property. The lender just wants to make sure they can get their money back no matter what. They don't really care whether you get your property or your investment in it either.
yeah, a lot of times, and I may be jumping along on the slides, a lot of times when I get questions from people, especially investors, because they're like, well, my lender's gonna be getting a lender's policy, shouldn't that protect me? And it doesn't. So what a lender's policy does is I tell the mortgage company, I'm ensuring to them that they're in first lien position. So if they ever need to foreclose, there's not gonna be a judgment that was against the buyer that's gonna come in first lien priority and has to be paid first. And then there's also not any other mortgages that would take that priority over the mortgage company. And so it does not provide any coverage for the owner as to their ownership in the property.
So specifically, like we said, title insurance protects your investment and your property rights. There's 2 different types of the insurance, the owner's policy and the lender's title insurance policy, which we just touched on. And the owner's policy is purchased by the home buyer. It is optional, and purchasing an owner's title insurance is the only best way to protect your interests. The title search we do, all of those documents leave room for human error. And so the only way to protect your interest is by getting that owner's title insurance. It protects you as well as your heirs, trustees, inheritors, and beneficiaries. So you bought your house, you pass away, and your children get this property, and then someone pops up. They're protected as well. And like we said, the lender's policy is usually paid for by the home buyer or the seller. It is always required, but it only protects the lender's interest.
Can I ask a quick question on that?
Yes.
So if you have a living trust and you pass away, your policy will insure beneficiaries.
Mhm.
Yeah, so usually, I'm probably gonna butcher the language, but, that policy is going to stay in effect so long as basically I'm trying to think of the way to word it, but basically as long as there's not just a complete ownership change.
Right.
So any successors that you would have in a trust or even personally would still fall up underneath that. And then I have a lot of questions where people will ask me, well, my lender, because of the loan I'm trying to do, I have to buy it in my personal name. But I do plan to transfer it over into my LLC, which is to everyone's benefit. I can't emphasize that enough. And if y'all got any questions regarding that, I know Ms. Pat was passed around my cards, or if y'all have any questions after this. That policy will still protect you because you are technically still that beneficial owner of the entity itself. So your policy still does protect you in that instance.
Question.
Yes.
If the property is donated to an heir, that policy still covers the heir?
That's actually a very good question, and I will have to check on that because I don't know if that would fall under an assign, because I feel like it should though. I feel like that should fall underneath it, but I can find that answer out for you.
Okay. So why should you purchase an owner's title insurance policy? Well, if you're a young home buyer, it's probably the biggest investment that you'll make in your life to purchase your first home. It's the smart option that protects you and your property from legal claims. It's a one-time fee, so it's not like, a lot of times when you say insurance, you're thinking it's like an annual thing, like with your homeowner's insurance. It's a recurring fee. It's a one-time payment, you pay it at the closing table, and it's there for the life you and your heirs own the property.
And that cost of that premium is based off of your sales price. And then for the lender's policy, it's gonna be the loan amount. But usually, and this is what I tell people when they go, oh my gosh, that policy is gonna cost me $800. Usually the cost of that policy is cheaper than even filing fees if you were ever to go hire an attorney, to even for them to file suit if you ever needed representation. And so that's why I do have to think about that cost in the long run versus that one-time fee.
Is it okay that we ask questions?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so on that policy, I just forgot the question.
If it comes back to you.
I already asked you.
Lord have mercy, that's so sad, y'all. Okay, we'll come back.
That's all.
Okay.
You're wearing the fly, you would go.
That's right.
It's wore out.
Yeah, we're going to attribute it to the fly, not age. Thank you.
Okay, so it's
I remember. I was waiting to get one syllable, I was going to interrupt you.
Holy Ghost.
So, is the cost of the policies, is it like, is there a sliding scale based on the contract price? Is it like, it averages 1% of the contract, is there, or is it just all over the place?
So I'm almost positive that it increases a percentage, so for every, like, I think it's every $500, I think, no, it may be less than that, maybe every 100.
Because I've seen like a property that's $5,000 and it's only being $100 for
Oh,
owner's
yeah.
title insurance. So
Really,
every few thousand, then it increases by a
But
coverage.
usually anything, I think, under 15,000, which I can give you a quote on that if you've got
Sure.
one. I mean, it's not like something we just make up. My underwriter tells me how much it's gonna cost. But, that, usually I think it's under 15,000. I think that usually those only run, literally, the base rate is gonna be $100 on those types of deals. And then it just increases by, I think I'm trying to remember how many dollars it is before it increases. Because a lot of times I'll have lenders, depending upon the type of the loan, they'll roll the fees into the loan. And so we're having a creep every so often until we finally reach a point that it doesn't increase anymore.
So it is somewhat directly proportional to the loan or the contract?
No, it is exactly
Yes,
what
your
it
owner's
is.
policy is based on what the sales price of the property is, and then your loan policy is based on your loan amount. So it's your amount of coverage.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
So this specifically tells us what the owner's title insurance covers. So if there's any forged documents, so when Taylor's reviewing those documents, she cannot tell whether someone has actually signed that document or if it was a forged document. She can't tell if someone mistyped this person's name and put their social incorrectly, and now that's tied to them. So forgery, fraud, human error, those are things that you can't see without lawsuits, basically.
You would be surprised by the number of phone calls I get, especially for their parents' property. I have had to deal with 2 separate instances within this year alone where their parents have put this property in a trust, okay? And so they've done the succession and they think the property's in their names, but it's not, it's still in the trust. And so I need those trust documents to be able to determine who the successor trustee is to be able to sign at closing. And they're gonna tell me, that's not my parents' signature. They didn't sign those documents. And I'm like, well, that's a really huge accusation to make, because if that document's been notarized, I'm gonna take it as fact that those were the people that were there. It's the purpose of having a notary and the protection that you have of having a document notarized. And then the other thing is, I had another situation come up where we were doing a refinance and this guy had a consent judgment against him. It was with Citibank for some unpaid credit card debt, and he swears to me that the document, the consent judgment that he signed was not his signature. And I said, I'm not trying to say that I do not believe you, but a judge signed this document, so you're gonna have to actually pursue action to prove that it in fact was not your signature. And I know that sounds really messed up, but we can't always take people at their word, and I bet y'all know that, so.
We don't trust anyone. So we have a couple of horror stories that we've curated. So this one, Taylor actually reviewed the abstract, and the next couple BJ gave me. His are thick.
So this was all Taylor's fault?
This one was all
It's not
Taylor's
my
fault.
fault. It's
Taylor
not my
found the
fault.
problem, so it's funny, when you point out a problem, you created the problem.
Yes.
So
I get
Taylor
that a
created
lot.
this problem
I
when
get
she
that
found
a
this
lot.
judgment.
Of course, yeah.
And this is a fun one because this is actually a broker of a real estate company that we work with a lot. He and his partner buy properties really on the low and then will revamp them and sell them, flip them, refinance them, and use them for rental properties. Well, he and his partner purchased this property in their LLC without owner's title insurance. Well, they go to sell it or refinance, I can't remember specifically what it was.
It was a refi.
They were refinancing it. And Taylor's reviewing the abstract and finds this judgment against one of the heirs of the judgment of possession from when they bought it. That was her judgment. I ordered a payoff because if it's only a couple $100, they're fine, they'll pay it. This judgment came back over $20,000. And they were like, do we have to pay that? Unfortunately, yes, that is now your debt. You have to cover that because
The property is subject to it. So a lot of times what people think they can do is oh, mom and dad left us this property and we went through succession, but my little brother owes the IRS $76,000 because he's not paid his taxes for a long time. So they're like, we'll fix that. We'll take the property and we'll put it out of his name and he'll donate me his interest and then we don't have to pay it off. And that's not how that works. It still attaches. So even though that judgment was not their actual obligation to pay off the property, it attaches to it. So in order for me to ensure to the bank that they're in first lien position, and in order for them to sell that property, they're going to have to pay it off because that's the only way to attach it, basically. And so in this instance, that's a lot of money for somebody to have to come out of pocket for. We're not talking a couple $100s. And we're all human. We check and we double check the mortgage records. I'm sure she can attest to that, doing abstracting work. You run every variation that you could possibly think of for people's names, but I mean, even the clerk's office can make errors with indexing and things like that. And so the first thing that they asked was, well, our lender has a title insurance policy, and that does nothing for them. So the only way for that to work is if the lender would have filed a claim for their own benefit. But in this instance, that was not, yeah.
Since they didn't have an owner's policy.
Yeah, they don't have any coverage. And so the benefit of having that owner's policy is you file a claim. Just like when you get in a car accident down the street, somebody rear ends you and they've got State Farm, you're gonna exchange information, get a police report, and you're gonna call and you're gonna say, well, I was rear-ended at this time and this was the damage to my car. That's the same way that title insurance works. So this is gonna pop up and you're gonna be able to call that underwriter and file a claim. In this instance, an owner's policy would step in, and of course, they're going to contact the agent that issued the policy and pull their file. But ultimately, they wrote that policy, and so they're going to, in this situation, would pay that out, pay for that judgment and cover that. So there's your benefit. You pay $500 for a policy, and you have a $20,000 claim. So, yeah, yes.
Okay, these are some of BJ's. And he sent me a voice memo that I had to transcribe. So if there's any wording that's weird, we'll
Blame him.
we'll blame him. Siri didn't do very well. So a couple years ago, BJ had a buyer and actually went to school with his daughter, so it was really fun working this situation. He bought 2 lots right next to each other, 2 5-acre lots, and he wanted to build his house right in the middle of it. Well, when they were running title, there was an easement on the east side of the property, and I don't even know if this is my east side, but we're gonna say this is the east side of the property. There was a right-of-way passage for Weyerhaeuser,
I think that's how you say it. Anyways, the old company.
Warehouses, yeah.
Weyerhaeuser. Well, Weyerhaeuser decides, so the man buys these 2 lots, and he's like, all right, we're moving forward, pushing our plans. I'm gonna build my house in the middle of those 2 lots, right in the middle. Weyerhaeuser sends him a letter and lets him know that they're moving their servitude from the east side and they're going right down the middle of those 2 lots. He's like, how can you do that? What do you mean? So he calls BJ, and BJ actually looks through his abstract. He doesn't see anything filed that says that they can move their easement or anything like that. So he's got a good relationship with Weyerhaeuser and Rustin, so he reaches out to them and asks them, what documentation do you have that says that you're allowed to move that easement to the middle of this property? And they're like, well, actually, we have a filed easement. The clerk of court had referenced their entity as an abbreviation instead of the full, and that's what our abstractor ran, was their full name and not their abbreviation, red code. So what ended up happening was did what they were supposed to do and filed their easement, and BJ and the man did what they were supposed to do and check the records. Since that easement was filed and it was filed under that, he did not get title insurance though. So he had no claim to it, and he ended up having to sell those 2 lots at a reduced price, and he took a big hit on what he paid versus what he sold.
So they just sit looking up under the right now.
Right.
Well, and that's what I was getting at with indexing is like I said, we are gonna run every variation. So I'm trying to think, Brian. Brian's a name that you're gonna have that can be spelled several different ways. You can have B-R-I-A-N. Yes, there's variations.
You're in
of that.
Louisiana, it could have a Z in it.
Hey, you never know, we can do E-A-U-X at the end of something, you know?
I almost invited him. I'm sorry.
So, but because they indexed it under their abbreviation and we were unable to find it, that's what it'd be. He said that's a perfect example how if he would have had title insurance claim, he would have been covered. First American and Fidelity, those are the 2 underwriters we work with primarily, would have stepped in and covered all those costs with getting that fixed and making sure that he got what he needed for the property.
Speaking of that, what's the difference between like Fidelity and their title policy, filing against that versus filing against E&O insurance? Is it 1 step, 2 step, or is it?
Okay, do y'all want me, I'm not gonna give y'all the lawyer answer, I'm gonna give y'all the really just nitty gritty,
Yeah, especially
okay?
out in Texas, he just needs to.
Yes,
That's
so, this is how, so in Louisiana, we have 2 different types we have a prescription for claims and you have preemptive. And so with those prescriptive periods, there can be a pause, you know, on like when a claim can run out. So like when I run into somebody in this parking lot when I leave here tonight, she's driving, so hopefully that won't happen. But I have a 1 year, that person has 1 year to file that claim against me. Now, with preemption, that period runs and there can be no pause. So claims against attorneys are only, there's a preemptive period of 3 years. And so with filing claims against E&O insurance, if you're outside that time period, I mean, it's good business practice for me to fix the mistakes that I make. So we're gonna fix something that our office messed up, but not everybody operates that way. And you may have to close with somebody that you didn't want to and they didn't do what they were supposed to do. There's just lots of things that can pop up. And so that claim you may have against that attorney, if you're 4 years after that, there's no claim against that. You can't go file an E&O claim on that. The claim is what we call prescribed. But with title insurance, you've got coverage for the 50-year period. So even if it's something that you don't discover for 20 years, that's not how that works. You can still file a claim against it.
Yeah, the issue that maybe Jared helped me out with, it was potentially against, an attorney for oversight that they had. But luckily, this attorney, he worked really hard and he cleared it up because neither nor his dad that has passed has ever had a file against her, so they didn't want to have to see that happen. So he was able to clear it up, so he was an honorable attorney. I don't know, are you supposed to do what you did?
You probably haven't. You probably haven't.
Like Taylor said, that's good business practice, so you don't want, because the word of mouth is the biggest snake in the grass. You don't want to be working with a title company and then make all these errors and not want to correct them, because how are they going to get recurring business that way? Yeah.
Question. Is 50 years a standard period of time to cover title insurance?
Well, it's a lifetime. So if you do own it for longer than that, you do have coverage for that. Now, the likelihood of somebody having that policy in place for the longer than that, I'm sure it comes up, but it's going to be your lifetime. It's not restricted to a time period.
Okay.
That time constraint is going to be for the lifetime that you own the property. Now, it does not, once you've sold it, that policy is no longer in effect. It's been surrendered by that point in time.
The company that actually issues the title insurance policy, not you guys per se, but the backers of that particular product,
Underwriters.
underwriters, if they go out of business, is there a conglomerate pool that covers that particular E.F. Hutton, for example?
Yeah.
When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. When E.F. Hutton's gone.
So I can't speak for First American, but I do know with Fidelity. Fidelity is another underwriter that we use. They actually are owned under an umbrella. So there's several companies under that one umbrella. So you're gonna have Fidelity, you're gonna have Chicago Commonwealth as one of them, and I cannot remember what the third one is. We do not write with them. The only one we write with is Fidelity. So that's another very good question that I'll have to check the answer on, because I can't speak for First American on that instance, but we're not talking about Joe Blow in his backyard that's doing this. We're talking about nationwide companies. Now, that doesn't change anything. I mean, you got people that go bankrupt all the time. But yeah, I do know that with Fidelity, they are owned under an umbrella company with several companies underneath.
Would that be a concern for a buyer to be able to identify that this company is solid, they've got the assets, the backing, and they're part of an insurance pool that will cover the policy in the event they go belly up?
It's not something that I have commonly asked. You're actually the first person that's ever actually asked me that question. So with these title insurance, I mean, there are tons of companies out there.
Yeah.
Tons of title insurance companies out there. We get asked all the time, you know, like, hey, we're gonna be in town, can we take you to lunch? The same way that I'm sure that other companies try to bring agents in for them. But I know that we have, BJ especially, has put a lot of thought into who we have written with.
Is there an AM Best rating on there?
I'm sure there is. I'll have to find that out too.
So this horror story BJ gave was about air property, and then he did this cute little Billy the Kid. I don't know who Billy the Kid is, but I left it in there.
Billy the Kid.
So on this one, like a pretty common thing we have is family or airship properties, and when we were entitled on that succession, like Taylor said, we're relying on that attorney to have done all the things correctly. We're relying on that judge's signature saying that he reviewed and everything is good on this succession. And then he says, well, there's a slip between a cup and a lip, as Billy the Kid used to say. So you have heirs that just pop up and say, hey, I own 50% of this property. I never got my money when you close on that. And so you're like, what do you mean? So on things like this, someone can come in and say fraudulently or just by error that probated a will that was not the final will, or somebody had died intestate succession using an attorney, and other siblings, that's a pretty common one. But his specific example is how we're limited to our review on what we actually find in the public record and what our abstract can produce for us. Otherwise, we don't have any way to know when somebody committed fraud or forgery. This one, BJ said that he had a brother filed a will, and it was not the latest, most up-to-date will, and it was actually a fraudulent will. BJ was the attorney for the life of the man who was deceased. And the final bill on that one was $30,000 to get the issue resolved. And the other side on the litigation probably had the same amount. And so had they had title insurance on that one, that would have covered all of those attorney's fees, and they wouldn't have had to come out of pocket to get that fixed.
And you would be surprised by the number of the chances of that happening. So for instance, I actually had one last year that we closed with our Bossier office. Reviewed the abstract. Woman she is their surviving spouse, and she's filed the will and the property, and the will left everything to her. Well, his two kids that were not her children, they go and they file suit against her and try to have that completely invalidated. Now, they did what they were supposed to do, and they went and hired an attorney immediately and filed what we call a notice of lis pendens, which lets me know when I'm reviewing an abstract that there's pending litigation going on with this property. So they did what they were supposed to do. But what if it's been too late and she's already sold it, and you have now purchased property where there's outstanding heirs that would have had an interest in it? That is something that actually does frequently come up, and I know we all like to say, it would never happen to me, but it does happen.
How do you know what you're looking at is the final will, or you don't?
The judge has signed off on it. So you're going to file with a succession, you're going to file a petition, and attached to that petition that where the attorney lays out basically what we call a story. one of the best attorneys I ever worked for, always said, with your documents, you're just telling a story. So your petition's gonna lay all the facts out about the person that's passed away, and then they're going to attach to that verifications that are signed by and attested to and before a notary saying that the facts contained in that petition are correct. So the only way for us to know, is to rely on is the judge's signature and the notary's signature, and that the facts in there are true. Because you could have kids out there that you didn't even, I'm not gonna say that you personally would know about, but that maybe a spouse didn't.
What happens when somebody pops up and says, I've got a will, and it's dated after that one? Is it-
So you're gonna, that actually goes into, that a lot of litigation goes into that, and testing like handwriting, and then obviously the facts. I mean, you're gonna have to battle that out in court for those types of things. That's not something that I would ever make a determination on. If there is ever any, like that situation.
Does title insurance cover that?
So the title insurance in this instance would, if somebody, like in this instance, it would have, and that, that somebody came out and they fraudulently probated the wrong, the wrong will.
Okay.
So, yes.
We had a client a couple of years ago that we're buying a house, and he said, he got it from his dad or whatever. Do you have any siblings? No, I don't have any siblings. Well, I don't have any siblings. And we had to go back to him and said, you said you didn't have any siblings. You have a brother and a sister. And he said, oh, well, my brother's in jail and my sister's gay, they don't count.
I have a property that I'm gonna be honest, I have never in my time, and I've actually never known anybody as well that I've worked under that's had this happen, but we ran title on this property that's been in this family for like 100 years. And of course, this has been in our property for 100 years, and we've never had anybody come out and tell us that they have an interest in it, and so they're like, it's mine, it's mine. No one has ever come out of the woodworks and said anything, we paid the taxes on it, that kind of thing. Well, paperwork didn't lay that out. Their great-great-grandfather, which they had to go all the way back to that point in time to really get a baseline of title. We couldn't just do 30 years in order to determine whether or not we had all the interest. Yeah, we went back further than that, because the guy, they probated his will in 1914. So a minimum of a 30-year search, but sometimes we do have to go back further than that, because if we can't determine whether or not we've gotten all of the interest, their abstractor's gonna go back further. And so, come to find out, their great-grandfather had been married twice. To the first woman, he had 5 kids, and to the second woman, he had 2 kids, which his grandfather was one of the 2 kids of the second marriage, and it didn't matter that the paperwork didn't match that up. He wanted to argue with me that it was theirs, and I was like, you can't, just because you've operated it being like that, the paperwork's got to match up with that too. So that comes up a lot. That's something I literally just had to deal with, so.
I got a question. Well, we've been hearing a lot lately about this home title lock on the radios. They've been advertising about people that are stealing the titles and by citing your name. And how could they get away with that? Just citing someone's name, number one, and number two.
You cannot. So I had.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about. So I had, funny enough, it was an investor. He owned an apartment complex, okay? And so we were getting ready to sell it. I mean, the sale is pretty large. It's like a little over $1 million. Very excited that we got, chosen to do this. And I'm running title, and I see what we call in our industry a wild deed. We see where they've signed over and transferred title to this one individual, but they didn't put any consideration. They did $10 in other valuable consideration. So I was like, that doesn't add up, and my guy's trying to sell this property, so why would he have already sold it? So come to find out, me and my underwriter did a little research, and there a lady in Shreveport-Bossier had gone and also fraudulently signed an attorney's name and his information.
As though it was being notarized.
Yes, so apparently she had gotten mad at her landlord because she was not paying her rent, and so she decided, I'm going to give myself to the title to this property. So she fraudulently signed their name, which didn't do it properly. It looks very, very terrible. And so, and it obviously raised some eyebrows for me, and come to find out she had already been arrested for doing that 3 or 4 times already. Yes.
So she got to live in a gated community?
That's right, she finally got to. For free.
Well, does something like that say it happens, I'm sure that, you know, people try to scam all the time. But if you have title insurance, does that cover that?
Yes, that's fraud and forgery are the things that are gonna be covered in that policy.
Okay.
So the first thing that I told them to do is we just need to file a police report, and obviously we could negate that wild deed. That obviously that was not legitimate at all. But yes.
The clerk had already pulled some of the other ones that she filed and made their markings so that if any title attorney came across it, this one just had not been missed.
Yes.
So if you did not have the title insurance, then they could
Well,
get away with it?
No, it's not that they could get away with it. It's just that, you know,
Had she been better at it and more successful, I think, and it would have caused more litigation, I think
Yeah.
then having that would have covered it. But with that, it was so bad.
I mean, you've got you could sue, that's a criminal offense, and you have civil, you can hold them civilly liable. It's not that they would just be able to get away with it.
Yeah, Joe, I think those ads, you know, they're trying to sell fear. You know, they're
Yes.
basically selling you a blanket you're not even cold.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so, you know, you just don't need it. But a lot of people out feel, oh my gosh, I need to get that. You know,
Right.
because of all the identity. Thank you guys for answering all the questions. I mean, and we have more. I know when I'm speaking and people have questions, I know they're fully engaged. So we're grateful for them
Yeah.
taking the time to answer these questions.
And I appreciate
Oh,
y'all.
yeah.
This makes us a lot easier because I had
Yeah.
to sit up in front of rooms.
I
of
was
people
afraid
that
we
were
were just gonna click through the
Yeah,
slides.
and so I've got a couple, two of them are off topic.
Uh-huh.
One of them has to do with, what is the foreclosure period in Louisiana, the foreclosure on property?
So I do not do foreclosure, like I don't do any sort of litigation in those types of instances or representing banks. Depends on the type of loan though, I will say that. Are you talking about for you to, like on an owner finance deal?
Yeah, that's a great example.
Okay, I can find that out for you on what that time restraint is on how, and I think that it all also has to depend upon what your documents lay out, like what your promissory note says. Like I know in our standard, we usually put in there that if they've not paid, you can on demand that promissory note be paid in full.
Right.
But they all read a little bit differently depending upon the terms that you put in them. But that foreclosure process is going to depend on that, and then also if you're a lender, the type of loan that you have. Because we all know, and I'm sure y'all, and I hope that y'all weren't affected, but with COVID, they put a stay on a lot of foreclosures and evictions. So, and that was with government-backed loans. You're talking HUD, you know, FHA, RD, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. My second question is even further off topic is tax certificates. What's the right redemption period in Louisiana? Do you guys know?
3 years.
3 years, okay.
Yes.
So anytime that 3-year period, they can come in and redeem it for the penalties, you know, and if
Yes.
not, then you don't own the house, you gotta still file a quiet title, right?
Yes,
Okay.
so I'm gonna just go ahead and tell you that if I tell people to run away from tax sales, just because they are extremely difficult to fix and I cannot always insure it. And it does cost a lot of money on the back end to fix it, because the easiest way to fix it, because basically what you've done is when you've bought something at tax sale is you're buying a tax sale interest. You are paying the parish for the taxes that were owed that year. You're not buying the property. So that's what people think, oh, I went and bought it and I got property for $500. You know, I've been seeing all over, you know, social media and TikTok and things like that where people go and they're investors and they're encouraging people like, you just need to go up to the clerk's office during tax sale time and sit and bid. And I'm like, you're telling, they're gonna lose money out on this. People that think they can go get a house for $500.
It may be like that in other states.
Yes, but here, no. I'm always gonna tell people to stay away from that type of thing.
Yeah.
But the easiest way to fix those types of things is to get a quitclaim deed from the actual tax debtor or record title owner. But that's not always easy to do, because I have to track down people, and we are limited to our own resources, which is, you know, Facebook, Google, that sort of thing. And then they don't have to sign. And usually, sometimes they're going to want consideration, of course, in that instance, and they know that they've kind of got you up against a wall in that instance. And then time is your friend on that, is holding on to those but I'm not talking about 3 years, I'm talking extended periods of time, 10 plus years. And even that alone won't always cure it.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
When the sheriff offers a tax sale property, and it's less than 100%, I don't do that anymore. I did it once and we got away with it because we did get a property for less than $1,000, kept it 3 years, did demolitions, but we only owned 97% of it. The original owner owned the 3%. And when we, a few years ago, we decided we wanted to sell it. So we had a contract and attorney to clean up that 3% for us, and it cost us, you know, like $5,000–6,000.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
expensive.
but it was cheap because we owned the property for 12 years and rented it for $900 a month for those 12 years that we owned it.
Yes.
And then eventually sold it, and it was a tax sale property, 97%. I would never do it again. Because
Probably a lot more of a headache than what you expected.
Yeah, it was.
But I mean, if you're planning, I'm not gonna encourage anybody to do things like that, but I mean, if you're planning to hold it and the basis of it is gonna be investment property,
Right.
you make your own decision on whether or not that's a liability that you wanna take on. But let me tell you, people get mad at me when I have to tell them, well, ma'am, you bought this property for $300, surely you didn't actually think that you owned it, so.
But the 3% owner could have come back during that 3-year period, but
Yes.
after the 3-year period, we did demolition.
Yes.
And legally, he was cut off, but he still had 3% interest, or we could not sell it because it was an encumbered title, yes?
Yes. So the really big issue with tax sales, and you know, I am learning with this every day because I see new things pop up all the time. One of the newest things that I'm seeing people do is they're going in and it's not being done properly, but they're going in and filing a monition suit
Yeah.
and immediately partitioning the property. Now, they set that money back in the record for whoever they're determined to be the record title owner or tax debtor, and that person can come and get their money. But then they sell it at sheriff's sale, and everybody usually thinks sheriff's sale is clean title.
No.
But it's not in this instance, and I had the unfortunate circumstance where I had to tell somebody who had gone and also gone and put money into this property and got it ready to be flipped, that this alone wouldn't be enough. But the huge thing with tax sales is it's a due process issue.
Right.
You know, you have to be given proper notice, and it has to be pre-sale notice, so before they sell it. And so that's the importance of the green cards that you're always gonna hear people talking about. I have to go and get the copies of the green cards from the sheriff's office. But Caddo Parish doesn't keep great records, so anything,
They keep good now.
they keep good records now.
Since 2013.
Yes, but anything before then, either they're not gonna be able to locate that service was given at all, or they're not been signed. Because if it's not been signed, that's not proper notice.
Gotcha.
Just because it's been delivered to the house in return, that's not proper service. And so I have an issue with that, because basically what they did is that several years ago, they changed tax sale law. And so anything after, I believe it's 2012, I'm pretty sure, if proper notice hasn't been given, that tax sale can be invalidated even after the 3-year redemptive period. So a tax debtor can come and say, I was never given proper notice of that sale, and if the sheriff's office is not able to produce evidence that it was, they can have that tax sale invalidated. Now, you may be entitled to some return of that, but depending upon what you've done with the property, you may not get all of it back. So that's just kind of like where the issue lies.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I had well, it's a multi-loaded question, but it was about the small succession process. I wanted to know first, I know the small succession is 75,000 and
It's
below.
actually more than that.
That's what I was about to ask, has it increased to 100,000?
Yeah, it's 125.
Okay, great. That was the first question. Second question is, what are all the costs associated with doing a small succession? And what if there are multiple heirs, and I'm giving a hypothetical situation,
go ahead.
multiple heirs, but 3 of the heirs are willing to sign their beneficial interest over to a third party?
So, first part of that is the cost. So we do have an attorney in our office. I personally do not handle successions. So just because we, not stepping on anybody's toes in the office, we do have an attorney that handles all of our estate planning. So like he does the wills and things on the front end, and then he also probates things. So for a small succession affidavit, those usually run about $1,500 plus costs, okay? Now, of course, that cost is gonna vary because as with everything, even our title fees, every attorney's gonna maybe be a little bit different. But with that small succession affidavit, and the reason it's cheaper than an actual succession is because you're not actually having to physically go file in the civil records and have a judge sign off on anything. So number one, the property cannot be over 125,000 total, so like all of their assets. So if they have multiple properties, it's not that each individual one has to be under that. It all total has to be under that. And then they cannot have a will. Now that, there's an exception if you're out of state, but I won't get into that. If you're in state, you cannot have a will. So it is a little bit cheaper and quicker because basically it's an affidavit that tells the story of the decedent, and we attach a death certificate and the heirs sign off as to the facts, and they're, the signatures are notarized, and we file that in the conveyance records. So it's a little bit easier. Now your question about heirs, now when you say not wanting to sign off on their interest to a third party, you mean like sell it to someone?
Well, basically, just keep it. I'll just tell you what.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a family property. It's my grandparents' property. My mom and my 2 aunts are still alive, but my uncles have passed and they have children. I have one cousin he just wants to be difficult.
Yes.
And I just want to keep it in the family and put it in a trust and put everyone's name back on it as,
So you do have there are some routes for you that, that can be afforded to you. Partition is the one thing. So one thing that we allow under Louisiana law is we're not going to make people be co-owners if they don't want to be. Now partitions are expensive, especially if they're not voluntary. And so you would actually have to file suit if they weren't willing to voluntarily do it in that way. And there's a couple of different means of partition. So one of the things, and depending upon what the property is, but if it can't be divided in kind, so meaning that you've got 20 acres and you can't give, you've got 5 heirs, you can't get everybody a 4-acre tract that's going to be of equal value, then you would have to do licitation, and now they are now offering private sale where you could have a third party that you have under contract and it doesn't have to go up for auction and sheriff sale. So there are some options for you. So, but I won't act like it's not expensive.
My third question is near and dear to my heart. What do you guys know about a land trust? Do you guys post things in a land trust?
I do. And so, Andy, if you're looking to set one up, I usually with trusts, the main benefit of the trust in Louisiana, now every state's a little bit differently. I remember one time I had this special type of trust that this woman had made in Nevada. And so the purpose of that trust was to kind of protect from like the public and the IRS, I guess, the value and the beneficiaries. But in Louisiana, we're very transparent about that. So we're gonna have to actually file either the trust agreement itself or an extract is what we call it, and it's a summary of just the basic terms of that. But really with the trust, mostly in Louisiana, the only times that I see it as a benefit is if it's, family land, and especially if you have kids. So, if you've got minor children, they can't own property. And so one of the ways to protect them is to put that property in a trust and list them as the beneficiaries. And then you can lay out terms that, whenever they become of a certain age, they can have that. But I mean, from an investment standpoint, I would probably talk to your CPA to see if there's any tax benefits from the two of them. I'm not aware of, but for investment purposes, we see LLCs being, used most often. So.
Yeah. And so we're talking about a land trust, right? Not a
Yeah.
living trust, Massachusetts Business Trust, a land trust, yeah.
Yeah.
Because we buy everything in a land trust. We own, for asset protection, privacy, and other reasons, the Darn St. Germain Act, to do all sale costs and things like that. So I was just wondering if you guys close properties in trust, so that's pretty awesome.
It's just keeping good records of that stuff, because I've got 2 files right now that their parents set this trust up, and they have no clue where that trust agreement is, and I'm like, I have to see what is supposed to happen next, otherwise I don't know, because they list, of course, themselves in the start as the trustees.
So in Louisiana, instead of filing the actual declaration of trust, we file the extract of trust.
Yes.
And every other state is an affidavit of trust. But does Louisiana require you to name the beneficiary?
Yes, so,
That just seems like crazy legislation.
It
What's the point of having a trust?
it's to be transparent in that instance. Now, the benefit of having a trust is you don't have to go through probate with that.
That's correct.
So you're not going to have to do a succession. And of course, it's going to protect your beneficiaries and things from creditors, because they can if I'm remembering correctly, which you're really testing me on the trust,
Okay.
because that was a very difficult part of law school in the bar exam. So with the trust, I do know that they can't come after the assets within it, but they may be able to take some of the distributions that may be made to like someone, but they cannot come and take that property. So you do have a benefit from that.
Because the individual doesn't own it, the trust owns it.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I'll have to check and see. I'm almost positive in the extract they require you to put the beneficiaries, but I know at a minimum it's the name, the date of the creation of that trust, any property that's owned in that trust, and then the trustees and any successor trustees.
And I'm pretty sure Louisiana current legislation requires you to name the beneficiary.
Yeah, I'm almost positive they do too.
That's,
It is, and so that's why I went back and forth with this guy in Nevada, this attorney. He was like, well, that just doesn't make any sense because that defeats the entire purpose of it. And I said, I understand it does in your world, but we don't have trust for that benefit in Louisiana,
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Well, that's what our trust, our beneficiary that we name is a personal property trust. So it really doesn't give you.
Yeah, doesn't give you much, you just got layers and layers. See, that's why, they always say you can never really tell the exact net worth of anyone because people put, things in trust and, LLCs and things like that. When I was in law school, I worked for Durrett when I was an undergrad at Tech, and so when I went to law school, I'd had experience of looking property up on the assessor site, and I went to school in New Orleans, and one of the things we loved is, there are beautiful homes all along St. Charles. So my friends would all be talking about their favorite house along St. Charles, and I was like, well, we can look it up. We can see what it's assessed at. But funny enough, I know that, I may be the only one that cares, but Beyonce owns a house in New Orleans, and I was able to figure out what the address was, and I looked it up on the assessor site, and she's got that in an LLC that's owned by an LLC, and then that's basically where I could get my research to. Like, you'll never know.
Yeah. I guess you layer it depending on your level of
Yes, you
paranoia.
can. You layer your protection for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, I've got to take off.
No, yeah.
But even though y'all are from McLeod, y'all are all right. Y'all are all right, but I was just going to say this around it. But thank y'all, I've got to take off.
Yeah, it was a pleasure being here with you.
Thanks, Roger.
Anybody have any other questions or anything?
I have a friend in Alabama who bought his personal home 4 years ago. He wanted to use the home as leverage for a small business association loan. They did the title search, and there was the city had a lien against the property for water bill that was pretty significant, a few $1,000s, that was not identified prior to him buying the property. He bought the property, couldn't think he had a clean title. He did not. SBA wouldn't give him the loan until this was clear. The water company wrote a letter and said, it's not him, he's not responsible. SBA still would not give him the loan. He has title insurance. Can we go back with his title insurance company and get a judgment, I guess, because that transfer, it was an encumbered property, basically.
Yeah. So I would recommend, being an Alabama property, I don't want to obviously speak to that, but my first step would be to contact the title company that handle that, first of all, to see if they would be willing to fix that. And then if they are unable to, then you file a claim, and I would just take that title insurance policy and I would contact the actual title insurance company itself and start that process.
Right.
Because if your attorney is unwilling to even produce documentation, that the title insurance company can force that. Because I actually had an instance where I was trying to clear up some title work, couldn't get this guy to call me back. And it just made no sense. I just needed to see what he'd done in his file to see if he paid this off.
Right.
And that just let me know he probably didn't. And so would not return my phone calls, nothing. So basically, I was just stuck in a hard place. I couldn't tell these people anything except for calling and getting paid off. So.
I told him to go back to the title company.
I would.
I'm not an attorney, and I live in Louisiana, I don't know what.
But that's what I would do. That's what I would do, is that first of all, is go to see the product, you pay for a service. And so,
It's on
but,
them.
and that's the point of having an owner's title insurance policy, is to be able to step in and, see, because It is an insurance policy, so you do have to go through that training.
Right,
So,
right, okay, great, thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Are there any situations that you can't handle in a closing? Are there any, if you come up with any weird investment, you know, partnerships, any kind of weird things that you can't handle?
No, that this far I haven't. I mean, the only really thing is if people aren't being, cooperative. If you don't have people that are gonna want to come and sell, they're not interested in selling their interest, there's nothing that I can do in that instance. Everybody has to be in agreement with the terms of that contract, and then one of the things that people don't realize is as a title company, I am a licensed attorney. I don't represent either side of the transaction. And so we represent just the transaction itself. So I'm making sure buyer gets good title, and I'm making sure that the seller gets paid, and that the terms and conditions of their contract are fulfilled. And so whenever there's strife between those two things and people can't come to an agreement, I'm gonna do what I can to get it to close, because none of us get paid unless it closes. So it's to everybody's benefit. But I mean, unless there's people are just not in agreement. And then that one property that I was telling y'all about, that I looked at that title work and I could not come up with an answer. I got my underwriter to help me with it, and it was terrible. Ultimately, there's some error interests out there that they're gonna have to sit down and determine, but he straight up told me he would not be willing to cooperate to fix those. So I said, at this point in time, I'm just not gonna do any more work on it, because if we gotta clear it up, you're not even gonna be willing to let us reach out to anybody. So that's the only instance I've ever come up with where we just have not gotten things to the closing table. So, but otherwise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful, wonderful.
Have y'all run into anything at all? I know it's coming up in some other countries, but blockchains, where people are doing
No,
blockchain.
I actually have not had anybody try and buy anything with
Can you tell them
crypto.
what a blockchain is?
With cryptocurrency?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Oh, that's about it.
That is
Yeah.
cryptocurrency.
Right.
I had a kid in law school, I took an extra little writing classes, like an extra elective, and he did his whole presentation on cryptocurrency, and I just sat there the whole time going.
We have a title company in Fort Worth that accepts.
Does it really?
Accepts crypto.
I haven't actually
So, well,
seen that come up though here.
No, well, Louisiana's really behind everyone, I feel like sometimes,
Really?
because we just now, hey, I like it. We just now passed the legislation to be able to do the remote online notarizations. So we're actually working on getting licensed and all of that, getting all those certifications and finding a company to work with so we can handle those types of things. But I don't know anywhere in Louisiana currently that's doing
That's interesting
accepting
though.
crypto.
I am gonna ask my underwriter about that though, because actually I haven't had anybody come and ask me
We
that.
haven't done it, I just saw they had.
Yeah,
they had
that's
a,
interesting.
Accept it,
email
which-
that we now accept,
Cryptocurrency.
Well, you have like all of, you have,
and there's like 500 different cryptos out there.
I know, but it's like, crypto assets are a really difficult thing for me because there's not a lot where you can do right now. You can just trade your crypto.
Right.
There's not a lot where you can purchase or sell with it. So I think that, but you have a lot of like Gen Z and like
Something's gonna
younger
happen.
millennials that have a bunch of assets in crypto, and so what are they gonna be able to do with it if they can't purchase property and stuff like that? Right.
Video
So
games.
it's like, it's interesting, so that's a
market.
really good.
But I will
Things are
say
looking
this,
into.
I will probably say, I'm not well versed enough on this, but I don't know what kind of like insurance backing they have with that kind of stuff. And so I think that would be like the biggest risk for us. Like that's one of the number one things is I will not accept or send a wire outside of the country. Well, we can accept it, but I have to wait so many days before we can close. It can't be same day. And the reason that is it's not federally insured cash. So if I send it to an offshore account, it's gone if it went to the wrong place. There's nothing backing it at that point. So I would imagine that if they're making a determination on that, there would have to be, it would be too risky in my opinion to not have some sort of backing. So, but I don't know if they.
We had a title company that took paid a guy by check, and he was from another country. And he brings the check back, and he had spilled coffee on it, and said, "Here's your check back, and can you just go ahead and wire me the money?" And they didn't check it. He did the picture of the check and deposited his check and to a foreign bank account. And then they gave him the wire transfer. He didn't know until they reconciled the books.
Oh, goodness, that's the stuff that keeps me up at night.
We do daily reconciliations.
Yeah.
So we would have caught that.
Yes.
I would have gone in to try and void that check and seen that it already cleared and
Yeah, we've got
Sure, I can't borrow you
extra.
money that's already gone.
Yeah, but he was only gone for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, you never know.
Oh, well, you know, he went down to the coffee shop and spoke coffee.
That is so crazy. That is so scary. That's very scary. That is the stuff that keeps me up at night is wire fraud.
Thank you
Thank
so
y'all.
much.
I know, we could sit here and talk for hours.
Enjoyed you all so much.
Sorry if we ran over.
No, you're good.